So is the consensus we're not unmuting ourselves, we're going to try talking to that speaker?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so I'm not in this?
Yeah, you just talk.
Okay.
So how do I get you to stop there? Okay. Get that. That's it. Thank you. Looks like Mr. Coleman's coming in, so I'm going to admit him.
Okay, we're ready to go.
Mrs. Sulzer, if you'd like to read the statement, and then we can do the pledge right after that.
Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, some members of the board were meeting virtually. Members of the public are welcome to attend the meeting in person or view the meeting via live stream on the district's YouTube channel. Okay?
That's for pledge.
Yeah, stand for pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We don't have anyone here for public participation. We do have Gino Fricano here to help with technology to make sure we've got everything set up. And joining us beside the board members is the administrative team who will be taking part in our strategic plan presentation. And so just wanted to welcome all of them here. I also wanted to take a time to thank our administrators and especially our custodians and Wes Smith. Obviously, we had some snow last night and came in early this morning and they had everything cleared off completely. It looked like it had just rained on the sidewalks by the time we got here, which was really nice. So they worked really hard and just very appreciative of the work that they did. So thank you very much. We're going to jump right in. Our agenda tonight, it only has 3 items. Under my reports, we have strategic plan. And then under Kathy's reports, we have the transportation contract and a discussion on minimum wage. For those of you who are at home, we are in the boardroom tonight to try to make sure that we don't have any issues with sound. So we're going to be running it completely through my computer. So if you are having trouble hearing any of the other board members around the room, please just let us know and I can move the computer a little bit closer to them because we want to make sure that you're able to hear that. I'm going to go ahead and hopefully share my screen. We're going to get started on our strategic plan presentation. You guys see my screen? All right, Gino, can you head back over? Sure. All right, so I haven't done this. Where is it? Where can I share it? Green button. Thank you. All right. So although it's great that we have this technology that we can be kind of all over the place and do this, it is really difficult to be able to hear when other people are sharing out. And so what I'm going to ask, unlike usual when we have a presentation, we can kind of stop during each section. We can wait till the presentation is done. And if you don't mind jotting down any questions you have, and then our administrators will be able to answer them at that time. So usually for our strategic plan, we have, at this time, we just provide the board with a giant 18-page packet, which is in your packet tonight. And we just kind of hit a few highlights. And we're going to do that tonight. But we wanted to go a little more in depth because the other thing that we have done is in the summer, we have always done a presentation for the board. Well, this year with COVID going on, what we ended up doing was all of the administrators filmed that presentation. And we shared it with the community. But a lot has gone on in the 6 months since that happened. Some areas you'll see that we had to hit pause and kind of redirect. Others you'll see we had to revamp, like when we look at some of our technology and some things we had to do for facilities. So I'm really interested for everyone to hear kind of what's been going on and to get some feedback. But that's why we're doing this tonight. the strategic plan was started back in 2015. You think now we're in 2021. And there's a reason that you do a strategic plan, so that you have a common thread throughout, and it's something that you can continuously go back to and reflect on. And each year, the district and its partners reflect on the progress that has been made, and that's just as crucial as putting a plan together. I've been part of many plans in many districts where the plan, you spend hours and hours and months, and then it sits on a shelf. I'm really happy to say that before I was here, that didn't happen, and we've been able to continue with looking at this throughout the time. So our areas of focus continue to be curriculum and instruction, culture, climate, and public relations, finance, facilities, and technology. And as I said before, there's a yearly presentation. Partners provide constant feedback and guidance. Unfortunately, we have not been able to bring together that entire big group of 40, but that's one of the reasons why we wanted to make sure we at least got it filmed and kind of put out there for people who were able to watch it. And we did have quite a few views of it. And then the plan is revised each year once you see what's been accomplished and see what needs to still be done. So the next step, as I said, we recorded it over the summer. We typically just provide a summary here, but we do think that it's very important at this time to update the accomplishments and future plans during the pandemic and beyond. And I just love this graphic. It's been on our presentation for a long time, but you're at that crossroads all the time of really looking where you are in the past, what happened, what got you here, where you are right now, and just as important, where you want to go. And I think that's really, really crucial that we focus on that moving forward. So our first group that's going to be talking tonight is our facilities group. That's going to be led by Fran Sataro. So I'm going to turn it over for them to go ahead, or I'm sorry, curriculum is first. It's different than in here. So our curriculum, which I believe is Megan Knopfnagel and Julie Bazian, will be starting us off tonight.
Yes, thank you. So there are two goals that are currently still in our strategic plan that are not on this slide that we will continue to keep. This was the goal that you see on your screens of the one that we had recommended in the fall of this school year. And the big change that we've done with this recent review is the change of the year of when this goal will be completed. And so the current goal now states by the end of the 2021-2022 school year, teachers will have the capacity to develop assessments in order to reflect mastery and grade level standards. And the reason why we've made this change to be completed at the end of next year is it will allow the district to provide more time to build that guaranteed viable curriculum that we've been talking about over the last year and a half. And then we'll be able to utilize next year's early dismissals or teacher institute days to really provide professional development for the staff on how to develop those assessments, how to align them to our curriculum maps, scope and sequences, and the standards, and then also allow time for the staff to be given the professional development on how to create those assessments so that they can align to all of those resources. So Julie is going to talk about our most recent updated timeline.
I apologize for any screaming in the background. I'm in the highest part of the house. So some of the major changes were for ELA. We just changed some of the wording a little bit. Prior or at the beginning of the year, we had coaching in there. With COVID, where there really weren't coaching opportunities, but our teachers were offered PD opportunities to attend. So that was changed for this year. And then just for next year, kind of putting that coaching piece back into there to get like workshop. I know they're, especially at the elementary school, they were still utilizing some of those coaches through school-wide. For science, same thing, similar. We kind of took out the coaching opportunities there, but left professional development opportunities for those teachers to be able to attend, and then just added that back in for the next year. Social studies was one of our biggest changes. We originally had what it pretty much says for the 2021-2022 school year for this year, but we weren't able to accomplish that goal. So we moved that for next year. But one of the changes that did happen for this year with the new laws that came in for the LGBTQ we had to implement some lessons there. So Jeff actually did meet with our social studies curriculum, or not curriculum, but our social studies team. To basically look at the curriculum we have now and how we can embed those lessons into there. So those were the two major changes, at least for social studies. And then math, there were some things that we had to adjust there as well. This year was supposed to be piloting for the elementary school for their new program. That had to be pushed off. They did implement their numbers corner. Junior high still implemented our new resources. So that was similar, but some of the things we had to move to next year. So those possible pilots of the elementary schools, and hopefully then the adoption of that K-5 curriculum. We're still working with the Casper project this year. We actually just met yesterday after school. So those are primarily just the major differences there. And then utilizing our math coaches next year with obviously the scheduling situations that had to be changed a little bit. So that's pretty much that for that page, Adam. And if you want to go to the next one. Our specials, we really haven't talked about much in terms of curriculum there. And then for our digital learning, to continue that partnership that we have with Discovery Ed. I know it got put a little bit on hold this year, and then continue that for next year. Since we have a new coach, we don't have Elaine. And then Megan's going to go.
And so for our Partnership for Resilience, we are continuing our district-wide SEL goals and incorporating the resources from PFR, Partner for Resilience. The junior high has recently implemented EduGuide. Every Wednesday, the students take that in their classes. And then next year, we'll continue those 3 areas, but then we'll go back to continuing the implementation and training for PBS, Safe and Civil Schools. That's something that I know even the staff is really looking forward to getting back implemented into the schools, that school-wide positive behavior systems, and making sure that we're all using the same languages moving forward with supporting the students. And then for assessments, again, that was our big goal for this year that we really recommended in this fall that we start looking at. This year, we'll just continue looking at the NWEA assessment data that we will receive from the winter and the spring. And then next year is where we'll really dive deep into the development of the ELA, math, science, social studies, and special areas assessments that will allow us to determine the level of mastery towards our standards.
Thank you, guys. Next up, we have our climate, culture, and public relations presentation.
All right, you can actually advance to the next slide, and we'll go over I'll go over the essence of, the action plan that came from this goal. Really, when we originally developed our strategic plan, we just wanted to make the school district, Chicago Ridge 127.5, a more welcoming place for our families, and really to reach out to all members of the community across all cultures and embrace the differences amongst the community and within it. And another thing we've really wanted to focus on is becoming more of a resource provider that they can look toward for help, with the different things that everyone's going through, and being part of a community, working together to help solve those problems. So one of the things that I'm glad that Mrs. Nothnagel mentioned was that PBIS, because this is kind of where, this work, that we're doing crosses over with our curriculum and, trying to establish those common procedures throughout the district to, uphold, good values. And we see a lot of that coming through as we, cope together with the pandemic. One of the great things that is going on, is that we've carved out time at the elementary buildings to do SEL intervention, different activities that are in support of mindfulness. I'll give some examples of them in a minute. But our theme for this month is communication, social skills to more effectively interact with others. So we kind of have a different monthly theme in the activities surrounding that to build on those SEL standards. And at the junior high, we're using the EduGuide system. We're piloting that new SEL curriculum this year, and we got a lot of good participation in it. More specifically, in terms of these action plan items, The Family Resource Guide is a document. It was developed, our social workers and counselors worked together during those planning days we had last June, put together a really nice resource guide and kind of checked into them to make sure that they were active and able to support folks seeking assistance through them. We have it published on our district website in the community section for families to, visit the resources they might be seeking out. It includes resources for financial assistance like Catholic Charities, information in food pantries in the area like Together We Cope. It also has housing assistance leads. The Pads Beds cooperation has been a real active member of our community for years. It's helped so many of our homeless families find shelter. There's resources for outside counseling agencies and parent support tips for their self-care. And one of the things that we hope to do is to continue adding to this as we find more valuable resources that we want to share. As far as mindfulness and self-care, it's really kind of been a natural iteration, I think, from our increased focus on trying to be trauma sensitive, knowing that everyone's gone through some level of stress or trauma within the last year, in our world and in our community. So we've done quite a lot in terms of, and I want to give some highlights, just what I've seen each building doing. When the weather was nicer, we saw staff doing socially distanced picnics outside, just taking that time to get out with nature. That's one of the nice mindfulness things that I saw going on. Miss Faye, our counselor at Ridge Lawn, was doing a meditation time, for folks that wanted to during their lunch period. Another self-care activity I know is scheduled for Findlay tomorrow. I think it's the word of the year. So I'm curious how that's going to go. And it kind of focuses on, again, that reflection, that mindfulness. Our counselors at Findlay, they also put out another resource called Writing a New Chapter in 2021. So we're kind of turning a corner, making new plans, and it really helps us focus on looking at our emotions and then helping us think about what ones that we have coming up that, might be difficult to deal with and what's our plan going to be for with that. And taking that mindfulness approach, one of the things we want to be aware of, it's more our thoughts, it's our senses. Some of the resources for kids are really neat that the social workers and counselors have put together. My favorite title was Belly Breathing with Elmo. So I haven't tried that one yet, but I'm sure the kids are going to find it interesting and probably have already. Another thing here I wanted to mention was, this week, Ridge Central, you're doing your kindness week, spirit week. And I know tomorrow is riding the kindness wave. So we'll see the kids in luau attire tomorrow. So we're trying to definitely keep spirits up. And some of these things will sound maybe familiar. I've mentioned a few in my board report too, but what's worth mentioning again is, Ridge Lawn's daily announcements are always worth a watch. And, the plethora of shout outs that they're giving to their peers, to their teachers, to their parents. It's great to see such a positive mindset. And it's kind of that attitude of thankfulness. I think it flows throughout that building. It's so evident. It's become a way of life over there, part of their culture. And I guess one of the biggest thing to mention is it brings to mind something that Dr. Platt, one of our counselors at the junior high, said. She sends these quotes out. She calls them "Everything is figure-outables." And the one that she sent out recently that really resonated was, it's never about having the time, it's about making the time. So it's great that we've collected all these resources, and now the hope is that we can kind of focus on putting them into action, helping each other and helping our families. And that's really the essence of the action plan portion of this goal. Now, Dr. Mendoza is going to go over the rest of our culture, climate, and public relations goal.
So our second goal is to focus and develop new avenues of communication for all stakeholders. And this is including everyone. And so that language is not a barrier. And to go along with the newsletters that the rest of our buildings are sending out, now there's a new monthly EL newsletter, and that's sent out via SMORE and Talking Points. And what those two platforms do is they're able to provide the information in the different languages so that the communication and the information is distributed and everyone is getting the same information. The second thing that we have been working on is just creating the different videos in different languages and sharing them out with families. And we are also having parent information sessions, such as Teaming Up for Success, which are offered in English, Spanish, and Arabic, along with a parent university. And we are also working with the library in creating multilingual story times and different activities throughout the different buildings to engage our families and to make sure that we try to open up those communication lines. And just again, ensuring that language will not be a barrier and making them feel more part of our community, and so that we all work together. Next
Thank you,
one.
Carrie and Socorro. We're going to move on to our finance team presentation, which should be Kathy and Demetra.
So our first goal is to maintain a healthy and transparent fund balances to provide fiscal stability in accordance with board policy. The ongoing goal for any organization is to maintain a strong financial position. And we plan on continuing to present a balanced budget and transparent fund balances as we did last year. With the current uncertainty of the funding for Illinois schools, the factors that impact funding must be continually watched, and that's what we plan on doing. So Kathy will go on to goal 2. Kathy, I think you're muted.
Okay, just to be clear, that was Dr. Thorne's issue there.
Wow.
We're
We're going to have a meeting tomorrow morning.
An original goal of the finance team was to explore new and existing funding sources to further support the district. In other words, how can the district find an equitable balance between additional funding sources while using its own money while still maintaining a strong financial position? The first step to accomplish this goal was to determine the long-term financial needs of the district. And this was done by updating the finance and facility plan. The detailed outline of the plan, it shows the project, the time frame in which it is anticipated to be completed, along with the cost. It was determined that approximately $9.6 million would be needed over the next 5 years in capital and building improvements. The $9.6 million will come from a recent issuance of $5 million in working cash bonds, along with utilizing $4.6 million from our fund balances. The next goal of the finance committee is to have a superintendent's finance and facility committee meeting by April 2021. When the committee met last January, they were asked to share ideas that they felt would improve in the learning environment of our students. And this was essentially a wish list of ideas that could be brought back to the board for further conversation. The committee discussed many areas, such as adding spaces for classrooms for both classroom and support services, securing the front entrances at all buildings, classroom renovations, and flexible seating options. Although there are a lot of important issues here, I'm very pleased to say that the highest priority was to secure the front entrances of the buildings, and that has been accomplished. In addition to that, a group of volunteer teachers provided input and went on a test drive of flexible seating options for our classroom. The goal of the next finance meeting is to continue to discuss the learning environment enhancements, technology needs, and classroom furniture. And hopefully by the next meeting, that classroom test furniture will be in some classrooms. And then finally, we had a new goal that was established just last year. And that was to implement an equitable solution to the Illinois Minimum Wage Act. And this law was established in 2019, and it will gradually increase the Illinois minimum wage for all employees to $15 an hour in 2025. Since last year, the district has increased wages for anyone below those minimums, along with the starting salaries for those positions. As we see the minimum wage increase in the future, the district must explore options to maintain an equitable balance of wages between all classifications of its employees. And Mrs. Georgianis will finish it up.
So we have a potential new goal of evaluating the needs of the district and allocating federal funding where needed. The basic PPE needs are masks, gloves, face shields, hand sanitizer, cleaning products, gowns, and plexiglass. That's just to name a few. Prior to the start of August 2020, we had to make sure that we had all of these items on hand to open up the schools. Now that we are open, and we are super excited that we are open, we shall continue to ensure the safety of all students and staff, as it is a top priority for the entire district and administrative team. As we all know, the pandemic has presented multifaceted challenges, especially on the social and the emotional well-being of our students and staff. There's also a rising concern about the academic learning gaps that have been created due to the challenges. And that being said, the district will need to ensure that the financial resources are allocated in order to assess the social and emotional well-being of both our staff and our students, along with our students' academic growth. It is anticipated that the district will receive approximately $2.4 million in additional CARES Act funding, which will be used to accomplish everything that was mentioned above.
Thank you, Kathy and Demetra. We're going to turn it over to Fran to start our facilities presentation.
All righty, everyone. My partner in crime is actually Wes Smith. He and I are the co-leads on the facilities team, and I almost had to beat him off to not present today. So luckily the snow helped him out a little bit. So I will share what we went over in our meeting, and also consulted with Kathy on this as well too, because anytime you're talking about facilities, we need to get our finance person involved to see what is realistic and what is doable as well. So the facilities team has 3 different goals. Our very first goal is an ongoing goal that will really never be removed from what we need to do, because we are always looking at our district space. We are looking at our enrollment of our schools and our different programs within the schools to see if we have proper space inside the schools and what we could do. So some of the things that were completed under the goal 1 is looking at new spaces in our elementary buildings for the math coaches that were hired by the district last year. So at Ridge Central as well as Ridge Lawn, we needed to seek out a new space for this great new position that each of our buildings were given. So we were able to ascertain that space. And another important thing that had to happen this year was the allocation of space at the buildings for quarantine rooms. We do have our nurse's office, but needing space above and beyond that if we had additional students that would need to be cared for. So we do have those spaces that were put at all the buildings, and Wes was instrumental in working with Pat as well as Corey to identify the spaces and Wes to construct the spaces. And ongoing is what we will be doing as we move into the spring and plan for next year is look at our enrollment, look what our patterns are looking like, and make some very educated guesses in terms of where we're going to be looking at next year in terms of our student enrollment in the classrooms and office spaces we need to accomplish that. For goal 2, it is looking at both our short-term and long-term projects at each building. With Studio GC, as Kathy had mentioned earlier, they've been working on prioritizing our different projects and looking at the long-range facilities plan. So this really has been a work in progress for us. It was very instrumental, as Kathy had mentioned too, some of the projects we did have accomplished was the key card access. That is something that definitely Detective Dave Mitchell and the Chicago Ridge Police Department have been seeking for all of our buildings, and are very, very pleased that we have crossed that off our list to secure our buildings with the key card access. So coming into the front buildings, you will be buzzed into the front office, and from there you would have to be buzzed in, or staff members using their key card to gain access to the rest of the building. The fire panels as well at the buildings were outdated and beyond life. So those were just recently installed during the school year. So that is a marked accomplishment as well. As what was talked about at our last school board meeting was the discussion of the roofs at each building and the favorable bids that came back on those projects to make that something doable and realistic at this point in time instead of stretching that out. So based on those favorable bids, Studio GC has some work to do going back to that capital planning project schedule to reallocate what the different projects are based on needs and resources. And our goal 3, which does refer specifically to safety and security features as well as procedures for our buildings. Again, the fire panels as well as the key card access falls into that goal as well. But what has been very timely during the end of last year and continuing into this year is all of the different procedures and protocols that we need to put in place because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So when we think about that, we think about our safety enhancements, hand sanitizers in all of our classrooms, MERV 13 air filters. Our buildings now have water bottle fillers that we didn't have before. The safety signage, air purifiers, the quarantine room are some examples of that. And when we think about our safety protocols, all of the different protocols we've put in place to ensure safety, such as temperature checks, self-certification, proper hand washing procedures, social distancing, and then the enhanced cleaning and sanitizing with you above and beyond what our own custodial and maintenance crew are doing, but also having an outside group such as Citywide coming in to do that for us as well. Moving forward, as we know, we continually get continued guidance from CDC, IDPH, and Cook County Department of Public Health. So keeping up with all of those protocols and change of procedures is very important for us to make sure that we are doing the right thing. So we will continue to do that. And our next part is really exploring what are particular cost factors that could be associated with the next safety steps we take. Some of the things we're looking at is the intercom systems at our buildings. Those are getting on the aged side. Some of them are past life in terms of what can be done to enhance them. Connecting all with that is the bell system, our clocks as well, and looking at our entrance buzzers, which will actually buzz people in from the outside to get in the building. Those we need to look at in terms of where they're at in their life as well too. And last but certainly not least is our continued work with the Chicago Ridge Police and Fire Department. This is yearly to take a look at our safety concerns with our district safety committee and always revisiting and looking at our district safety plan. So that way that is updated and that is available and provided to our staff.
Thank you, Fran. I'm going to turn it over to our technology team, which is Jeff, Leanne, and Gino.
And that Gino, is he available to start off? I know he's there, but I don't know if he has a computer near him. The first part of this is for Gino with infrastructure.
Gino can come over and use mine.
Okay.
Sit if you'd like.
All right, so for my segment for the technology plan is I'm going to go over with the infrastructure. So what I propose is coming in with the newer budget with E-rate is to standardize our networking appliances district-wide. Reason for that is probably for the past 6 years, it is up to date and it's running and working, but I'd like to get everything to where it's uniform with all our switches and all our routers. That way it's easier to maintain. It's easier for end of life. It's just much easier to track to as well. So, I mean, mine is relatively fast. So Leanne, you would be next.
Actually, I'll kind of hop in here with our devices piece. This is the next, obviously a huge celebration for us as a district. I remember 7 years ago where each school had one computer lab filled of about 35 computers, and now we're up to over 1,500 Chromebook devices, and we've built upon that over a 7-year period. That being said, obviously, some of our devices at this point are a little bit older, up to 7 years old. So we're having some issues with those, and Gino and the technology team have had to do a number of different things to get those back up to speed. So one of the things we were looking at was a possible 3-year Chromebook cycle where it would go, students would get a new Chromebook in kindergarten, and then 3rd grade, and then 6th grade to kind of keep our devices up to speed. And then to develop one-to-one program that we've been able to accomplish, which is pretty impressive in itself. I remember the last.
Sorry, Mr. Youngberg, you are freezing up there. Ms. Kazmarek, would you be able to finish him up if he's unable to continue?
Yeah, and the last piece he was just closing with was really where we're kind of at right now with that one-to-one program. It kind of got rolled out very quickly. So really moving into the next couple of school years, going through that program and really honing in on what needs to be done and how it can be kind of implemented in a more strategic way. And then the last piece and goal for the technology team for the presentation is talking about our technology committee. This is something that was actually relatively new for the strategic plan. It was added in last year. So first we had to really develop that infrastructure and the devices. And then the committee's job was to see how to move forward, what was needed next. So last year we were able to meet twice. We met in the first trimester, and their goal was really to create a survey that would go out to the staff to get that information and the feedback of what was still needed in technology in the district. And then the second time we were able to meet, the committee went through those surveys and really broke down, here's what's going really well, and here is what the staff feels we still need. And then what training do they really need to be successful moving forward with all of these new devices and technology pieces that we've been rolling out. The timing actually worked out with that pretty well because we met in late January, early February to go through that data. And then lo and behold to everybody else, we really had to roll out the tech piece when we had to switch to remote learning last March. So some of that information was really valuable in knowing directions and some decisions that had to steer how technology was being utilized in the district last year. So what we did is last year with it being new, we just said, well, let's meet once per trimester. And this year we've really learned that moving forward, we're going to have to adapt that schedule. So the goal was once per trimester, but really now we know moving forward, we're going to have to focus in on front loading the information. The teachers, the staff, are going to need that PD, that training, the information to start the school year and get up and running, and then have some time to play around with it, familiarize themselves with it, become comfortable with that, and then make adjustments accordingly, and then really reflect at the end of the year. How did that go? Was it successful? Can we move on to a new piece? Do we need to backtrack? Do we need to get some more training and really make those adjustments? So instead of once per trimester, it's really going to be more of a beginning of the year as front loading that information, and then the end of the year, that feedback, that support, the evaluation of how it went. So looking forward to the 2021-2022 school year, we would really like to gather that information at the end of this year as the tech tech committee with a new survey, and then make those decisions of what we need moving forward and really utilize Elaine Roberts, who provided some very valuable professional development for our staff in the beginning of the year. Something like Google, who we thought, okay, we're kind of dabbling with it. Most of our staff might say they've mastered it and are very comfortable with it, and at least have the inner workings of what they need to be successful using the Google platform. So now what do we need to go further? And really using Elaine to provide that PD for the staff, whether it be in small Zoom sessions. She provided some videos for them to reference to help drive their professional development in the tech world moving forward.
Hey, thank you to the technology group. I just want to lead with the same quote we normally do, and that's imagine the possibilities of the strategic long-range plan. We've come to the end of the original 5-year plan. If you remember back in October, we had Dr. Madonia present to us. We felt that this was not the right time to move forward with starting a new plan and working with him. And that doesn't mean it has to stop, though. We continue this. We continue to look, as we said at the beginning, at our past, our present, and our future. And that's really what we wanted to do tonight. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen and open it up for anyone who might have any questions now that I can see everybody on the screen. Mrs. Salzer?
I'd like to know from the principals, assistant principals, what is your feeling about how the students take care of the computers? Just curious.
Overall, our students have done a phenomenal job at keeping them in great shape. If there's ever issues, we've had a few accidents, nothing intentional, but they've done a really great job of taking care of them at the junior high.
Okay.
When you consider how many are out there and then how many come back to be serviced, it's not that many, you know, and we have them in the hands of 3-year-olds to junior high students. So I would really say that it looks really well. And a lot of the issues that we are getting back, it's just wear and tear on the computers. You know, there's charging ports that are going bad and things of that nature. So it's things that you would really expect to see. Have there been some careless misuse here and there? Sure, but nothing major at all from what we're seeing.
And I would say our bigger frustration with the Chromebooks is Gino and Bill have done a great job of fixing and piecing together everything, but they only have such a long shelf life. We ordered 180 Chromebooks back in July, and we received them last week. So, I mean, that's not just us. I mean, one of the parts for these Chromebooks is made in Wuhan, China. So the supply line is just, it's really, really backed up. So we would have been able to be putting some of the new Chromebooks into the cycle at this time, which we can now do. But that December was a tough month where we were really sweating out if we would have enough at that time, but thankfully we do.
I have one more question.
Go ahead, Mrs. Salzer.
How many do we need to swap out at this time? Because I know we've gotten some at different times. So if we're going to keep this cycle going, how many do we need to swap out and buy new ones?
Usually we do this, it's roughly about per year, about 3 parts worth.
Can you come speak in here?
Yeah, I'm just curious as to how many on each cycle, I guess is the right word.
So each cycle roughly about it's 3 carts. So 3 carts worth is 30 a piece. So you're looking at roughly like 90 a building. So 180.
270. Was it 270? Yeah.
Well, this one we had 180.
Yeah.
Oh, so we're gonna need to buy 270 for the coming year.
So, yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
Approximately, yeah.
270, yes.
Okay.
And then, yeah, and so what that does is then for, within our cycle, that all goes out.
And we'll
Because
just keep.
a lot of that stuff that deals with the Google Chromebooks, because what happens is they keep on shortening the time now of when they actually upgrade these things to automatically update. And what happens is they cut it off at a certain time. It's no longer will they get automatic updates anymore. And basically what that is when the students are using these machines, that these applications require a certain version. So if they're not updating anymore, it's pretty much only good for like surfing at a paperweight at that point. And they just get slower and slower as time goes too as well. So yeah, so that ensures kind of they have a nice flow of refreshing.
Mrs. Lammel, and then I saw Mrs. Egan after that.
I know we had talked about this back early in the spring about how we were going to be getting rid of some of the items, like either allowing them to be purchased, or we had talked about like not auction or that type of a thing. I know Christy had brought up what they had done at her school, and I was just seeing if we had done anything more than that. I know with COVID, a lot of things changed, but it just seems like that would be a really great thing to be able to do.
Yeah, we slowed up who we were going to come into the buildings and see what we
Right.
had, but we definitely, if you go down in the basement, that is something we want to do
Yeah.
because we need to clear space out. And I think it's also benefit to those who can get them.
Yeah,
So,
exactly, because you could maybe have some people, and I mean, true, it is true that some people have had, I mean, I kid around, I mean, I call over to Cindy and I'm like, hello, you gave Annalisa Lisa a bad computer again. I swear, she's got the one with the fourth that always goes bad, but
Mhm.
it's okay. We've been able to come over, get it done, you know what I mean? They're always really good to help. I have to admit, if there's ever been a problem, first thing in the morning, go pick up a new computer. So it is good, but it's kind of nice if there was an extra one there, it wouldn't be such a, you know,
Yep.
or anything like that if you had something like that,
Yep.
so.
Yep.
Okay.
Mrs. Egan?
Okay, I have a few. We're going with each category, right? Or just technology right now?
No, you can go with any category you're ready to talk about.
So with the technology, with the cycles that Gino just referenced, he said about 90, but I guess I would think it would be part of the plan, or at least know that there is a separate plan somewhere that spells out how many, because we have not only bought 90 each year, so it would make sense that every year there's a different amount that need to be cycled out, and I would hope that that is documented somewhere, that it is being kept track of and not just triaged as things are dying, or just taking, bottom 90, even though, 150 of them were bought in the same month. So that wasn't discussed. There wasn't a cycle as part of the plan with technology. So that was one of my questions about a cycle. So then I was glad to hear Gino reference a cycle, but that should be a system, not just Gino knows what the system is.
Agreed.
Okay. Then it was also, there were iPads that were purchased this year for, I think, pre-K, as part of a grant or something. And I thought that we had discussed prior using iPads at the pre-K or early childhood, or even, now as you're talking, having a device for K2. So I'm wondering what that wasn't, I don't know when or how we've talked about that, but it wasn't part of the plan right now. So I'm just wondering what the status is on that.
Yeah, for the iPads, we really envision that being used in the classrooms and not necessarily going back and forth. Anyone who's used an iPad knows that those are much more fragile. But really, the cycle is kind of in the beginning of the conversations. It's what we've talked about as one of those new goals. So we do have a lot of work around the idea of the cycles and exactly how that would work moving forward.
But so is purchasing more iPads and implementing that part, that wasn't listed in the technology plan. So I'm wondering, is that part of the plan moving forward?
By more than we currently have?
Yes.
We have not discussed that. You want to go, Kathy?
Yeah, I don't, and I'm not part of the technology committee, but I do not believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the future purchases of iPads were discussed. They're a little bit more expensive than the Chromebook. So what we did is we did purchase 80 something, I don't have the exact number, iPads for our early learners, around the first graders. And that money was out of a digital equity grant. And most likely that is going to be just a one-time grant. But if the board decides, of course, we could have conversations about purchasing more iPads in the future as part of the plan.
Could jump into to address, because we were able to get the one-time Gear Cares grant for pre-K, which did give us some money. We wrote into that grant, and Gino's pricing them out for us, some iPads to replace the current technology they have in the classroom. So for the pre-K rooms, the teachers do need to use the iPads for their observations, for data collection, as well as having some iPads available for a center in the classroom. So we did budget money into that grant as well too, to be replacing they're pretty outdated, the ones we have for the most part. So replacing them with about approximately 5 iPads per pre-K classroom, We always have to be careful with pre-K because the grant requirements put a very strict limit on the amount of screen time for when they're in the classroom too, but that's what we were planning with that additional money that we received.
And that's not something that's coming up at any other grade levels, wanting to explore iPad usage and the creativity options that are available with that?
Yeah, I know we had a brief discussion and just really talking about if it's going to be something that goes home with them, is that the way to go? Because they are much more fragile than the Chromebooks. So again, we're very early on in our cycle discussions, but it has focused mainly on Chromebooks at this time.
Okay. With finance, I mean, it was briefly mentioned with the new $2 million that was going to be available, but not like how that's going to be allocated, or even like, are there plans for making plans? Are there wish lists that are being created? Do we not know how it can be allocated so far? So like that's 2 steps ahead, or what's that's a lot of money that's on the table. So it sounds like we should be planning for that sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and if Kathy wants to jump in, but what I will say is that right now, we are just starting to get the information of exactly what we can spend that on. We've heard different rumors that, yes, it's going to be extremely flexible, but then we also know that in the past they've said that, and then they start narrowing it down a little bit. So we're just starting to see the webinars from ISB. We officially, I think, finally got what it is going to be. It was just, all right, here's the preliminary. We just now are starting to hear what we are going to have. But you're right, that is a very big amount of money that we need to figure out where it's going to go that's going to benefit our students the most. And so, yes, we're going to have to get together and talk about that and prioritize the list and take it from there. I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I'll just add that even in the last week, the due date has been extended. When it first came out a couple of weeks ago, all the documents said we could spend that money through September of 2022. And last week I sat through a webinar where it's actually through September of 2023. So definitely a lot of money to spend. And fortunately, they are giving us a good amount of time to utilize that.
I'd like to ask a question regarding that. Is it going to be treated like grant money where you have to fill out a bunch of paperwork to see and then itemize everything you spent it on?
Yes.
And make sure it adheres to the protocol?
Yes, what we do is we'll have to write a grant just like we do for Title I or pre-K. And then what is required of us is to submit a quarterly expenditure report.
Yeah, okay.
And then they will fund that accordingly.
Okay. I guess that kind of goes into the culture one too. I had some questions in terms of planning for the future post-pandemic, what that's going to look like for all of our kiddos, regardless of the grade level. You know, I know at the last board meeting, we discussed the survey results, and people were concerned with the number of percent of parents who were concerned about their kids. I actually, when I look back at that, I was more concerned that that number wasn't higher. Being a teacher myself, seeing the differences in kids and the not just the content, but their, you know, the littles are used to having a one-on-one aide, somebody with them, working with them if they're on Zoom. Smaller classes, they're not having lunch, not having recess, not having any partner work and group work and activities to collaborate on, and all of the things that like we're working on just getting better at as a district have completely had to go away. And so I want to know that that is part of the discussions at every building level, is how to build those things again in this ideal world, and how we should be planning for that, whether that's PD, materials, whatever, you know, what do we want for our kids and how can we best get them there instead of PD for right now. Because right now is temporary. As much as it's been a year and it feels like forever, it is temporary, and we have to go back to what is best for kids. And so much of what's happening right now is not going to be best for kids in terms of their own development. So I just wonder how much time is being spent on like what it should be and what it could be and what it will be versus like what's happening right now.
Yeah, I will say our conversation, our last admin meeting, which is I think exactly 2 weeks ago from today, was all right, we have started the new year and we still have to make sure we get through January through June. But this is the time to start working on that while also looking towards the future. Because you are right when we say like we were building, workshop model, all these wonderful things in the classroom, it stops right then. We have to, I've used this word with the admin and with teachers that we need to reset everything away from what this year was, while still remembering some of the things that we can carry along. I think just the understanding of the social emotional piece that teachers have that was building, I think just that full understanding of it now is just everyone understands why that's so important. We have to make sure that carries all the way through. But we have to couple that with understanding what works in the classroom. And if we can bring people together, we definitely, as long as COVID's not forcing us to keep kids away, there should be group work all the time and teachers walking around and kind of guiding those discussions with kids and then giving them time for independent work. So those are discussions that we are having. I still believe that just based on what we're hearing, that we're still going to have some of these different things in place, whether it's still a mask mandate, whether it's still offering remote learning for families who choose it. So we're still going to have those pieces, but I feel like districts have gotten a handle on it now and understand what we're in currently. And now we can start looking towards that future. So those are the conversations that will be taking place.
Okay. That was it for me. Sorry, I know that was a lot. Thank you.
Mrs. Slaughter?
Has anything been said about the new school? I mean, I would hope to see next school year, everything just try and go back to some type of normal. Has anybody been to South Cook been talking about anything about, like you said, possibility of some kids still staying remote for next year?
Yeah, and that is completely my opinion, just based on knowing kind of how the state worked. There has been nothing said about next year. The closest we came was when during the last legislation before they introduced the new House and Senate, was that they could possibly be extending the school year days. That did not pass. But that's really the only thing that they've talked about at all from a state level. Okay. We are still waiting to see if we're going to have to take the IAR tests in about 7 weeks. So we're still waiting on that, and I'll keep you updated. So, Mrs. Petropoulos?
Hi, just two couple quick things, I guess. Tirza had brought up about all of the excess electronics and equipment, and Gino had talked about cycling out and things not updating and what had you. And so the idea of selling that excess stuff that you guys had, the concern was having other people in the building. These can be done totally via spreadsheet on the website, no contact, sight unseen by pickup. So obviously as things open up more, and hopefully the weather starts to change. I know it's a blizzard now, but in the spring, that could be done very no contact. It's not like a garage sale where they come and look at the stuff. You make a list of what it is, you talk about what's wrong with it, and people will buy anything. And they sell those things. So just to put that back out there, that the pandemic shouldn't stop someone from cataloging all these things, saying what is good, what the year is, what they're good for. They can all be cataloged and put together, and a bid price can be put on it, and it could be something that's put out there to possibly try to get rid of some of these items, and maybe recoup some funds if possible. The iPads, I was surprised to hear that those were gearing towards first grade, when I feel like, I know you said for use in the classroom and not to send them home, but I feel like, skills and things like that, especially, I have a kindergartner, like using the computer and things like that. Having a touch screen seems like it would be so much more beneficial for kids who couldn't grasp things and use a mouse or use like the mouse on the bottom. So I don't know how those are being implemented within the pre-K rooms or with kids who have possibly, dexterity issues with touching stuff. And then what was the other thing I wanted to ask? Oh, the one-on-one devices. I do think it's fantastic that we have one-on-one devices now, but I encourage in the future as we move forward, keeping everyone on one-on-one, like what is their purpose in the real classroom? Because I had heard you say before, Adam, that you never wanted to walk in and see, 27 kids sitting on a device and a teacher. I know that for older students, having the one-on-one device is something to, have access to technology at home, be able to do homework and things like that. And so I'm always thinking about that they have less screen time when we're in the classroom, less using a one-on-one device, that more be for fostering doing things, either working in a group digitally or working at home. So that's my thoughts with the one-on-one devices. That was my curiosity. The other question I had, and I know obviously this is not the year to implement it, and I saw on the revised plan about the assessments. I guess they would be a summative assessment that would see if students were reaching benchmarks at the end of the year. And so I know that the team is thinking about, or it says on the plan, to be making those next year to make sure students in each grade level are, meeting the goals of the common core curriculum, meeting, not exceeding, but where they at, or if they need improvement. And I'm just curious if we're making these, and I know that the pandemic is not permanent, but the impact on student learning probably is going to have some level of permanency for a few years. So I'm wondering, in making those assessments next year, do we make the assessments in best case scenario to meet Common Core? What is the goal? Because if this is supposed to impact maybe evaluations and things like that, I'm wondering, are students going to be in like a needs improvement category because they may have lost some one-on-one curricular instruction type of time? I'm just thinking about like formatting these assessments, but then how they would impact the staff and the students at the end of next year, if that's when they were going to implement them, if that made sense.
It makes complete sense. And really with common assessments, our goal right now is to really get teachers comfortable with creating their own assessments, and to really understand that you're going to have your lesson, your unit, whatever you're going to have, and working towards something. But you're right, it's not going to be, all right, no matter how much time we put in next year, that all of a sudden any quote unquote learning loss is just going to magically disappear. This is going to be an ongoing thing that we're going to continuously have to address. And again, our goal is really to keep working with the staff to create these common assessments long-term, not just to have them in place by the end of next year, but to continue to create those. I don't know if any of our other admin has any other comment. Mrs. Egan, I saw you had a question.
Yeah, so you said that you want staff comfortable writing assessments. Have they been trained on writing assessments?
That's what we have been working with our group on, is how to create these assessments.
So are they getting outside training, or?
So we were back in March, right before I can't remember, Dr. Thorns, if you remember the specific date, but it was the Institute Day, maybe March 17th. We actually had a gentleman that was going to present to the staff about standards-based grading and standards-based assessment development. And that was one of the things that in our action plan, we really wanted to include, that the staff was trained on that before we gave them the go-ahead to move forward. And that went all the way down to the bare bones of what are the standards asking the students to do, what does it mean to meet those standard expectations, and then build assessments from there. We definitely don't want them to all just go off on their own, because this really should be common grade level assessments across the district. So second grade units of study for math and ELA that are common. So we can use those assessments for that data collection across the district and use it as another point to check that recovery of what we need in order to support our students with that learning gap as well.
So all teachers were trained, not just like one grade level representative who's training the rest?
So we haven't done any of that yet. Yeah.
Oh, so the March one did not happen.
Correct. It was scheduled for March 17th.
Okay, so then when is that going to happen? So if you want them by the end of next year to be proficient at this, when will the training take place, and how will there be more than one training? And are you going to train every teacher so they can work as a team? Or are you training one person?
Yeah, no, we would definitely be looking at training everyone. You'd have a large training and then start paring it down to more smaller groups for them to do that. And that's really one of our focuses for next year.
Okay, so that's not scheduled as of yet.
Because even beyond the training, there's the idea of looking at the standards for each grade level and then kind of unpacking them and assessing what are the essential skills we want to leave with. And the biggest thing I'm going to say with this, I think that it is good to have these standards so that all second grade students are guaranteed that they're receiving the same, I'm not saying that teachers don't, but sometimes some teachers focus on more things, that we're all focusing on what are the most important things in this curriculum. But my biggest thing is that, and I could urge, and they'll talk about this, is that what are we doing with the data? After you take these tests, are you going to derive a second grade pool of data at the end of the year going to help fuel the team for third grade on what they're going to be implementing, what's lost? Because I think a lot of times these tests happen and then the data's kind of just there. Maybe the teacher looks at it, maybe it's not. So those are all things in the planning process that I think are important in how the data is going to be kind of collected. I know that there are systems that, kind of scan and do things and whatever. So these are things I was thinking about when you were talking. Sorry to interject.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions on the strategic plan? All right, I wanted to thank all of our administrators. If it's okay, I'm going to let them hop off so then we can, as we move into Kathy's Chief School Business Officials report. Have a great night, everyone.
Night.
If you'd like to head out too, I think we're good.
Let me get you a shirt that says Gino is the clown.
Nobody wants to stay for my
Yeah.
section.
And is everyone able to hear Kathy okay? The sound's working, but were you guys able to hear her before when she was presenting? Yes. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy then.
Oh, that was fast. Okay, thank you. Okay, just two things. I just wanted to have a conversation with the board about tonight. The first one is our transportation contract. Sunrise Southwest provides our transportation for both our regular ed students and our special education students. And last year, if you remember, we negotiated back and forth with Sunrise for our contract renewal, which was historically low, and last year they came in a bit high. We ended negotiating a contract for an increase in both services at 10%. And so what we wanted to do this year is we wanted to get that renewal a little bit earlier in case we wanted to go out for bid. Now, I know when we had a discussion last year, especially some board members that have been with us a rather longer time might have had some experiences with other bus services. And I do feel that Sunrise is doing a good job. We don't really have very many complaints. But that being said, 8% is an increase. And I've been reaching out to other school districts to see what they're doing. And it's a little bit of a mixed bag. Some of them are saying that when we go out for bid, even your current vendor comes back higher prices, and we're not getting a lot of bids as well. Some of them, one of them actually said it was a favorable bid. So really just wanted to engage the board. What are your thoughts? 8% at a 80% reimbursement, depending on the proration, could be between $40,000 and $50,000 cost to the district. So the question is, do we want to go with the 8% renewal, or do we want to go for bid?
Yes, Nancy.
Okay, so do we have any idea what approximately the costs from other districts, what they're paying, or what their increase is from some of these other companies?
Yeah, I reached out to a couple of different school districts and the information it's a little sparse. So some districts have had very reasonable ones. I would say honestly though, they've been a little bit higher. And also some of the new contracts have COVID clauses, with minimums, they have clauses if we close down. So a lot of things to weigh.
And the pool is becoming smaller and smaller because there's one central company that's buying out all the others. And isn't Sunshine one of the odd ones out still?
I don't know. I know they're larger, but I do agree that the number of providers are getting less and less, which virtually creates a little bit of a monopoly.
Yeah. Elaine?
My question is when they came back with the 8%, did we have any types of conversations with them to try to negotiate on the 8% obviously going out to bid, and or did we advise them that one of our potential routes that we would take would be to go out to bid in hopes that they would bring down the 8% maybe to something lower?
We did not have that conversation. Normally what we do the minute we get that proposal, we go back and we do a counteroffer. And when we tried to negotiate last year, we really got nowhere. So I certainly can go back. My gut feeling is that they weren't going to budge. But no, to answer your question, no, we haven't given them a counter proposal.
And all I will say is, in just talking with other superintendents who've done this for many, many years, it's a 50-50 split. Some years you go out to bid and you get a little bit better. Some years you go out to bid and they just skyrocket every bid that you get in. It's bad enough that I know some superintendents have talked about even creating their own bus partnership where they buy the buses and they run it themselves. And when you think of insurance costs and everything, that just shows how high some of these bus companies are raising their prices for districts to have to start thinking about that. The only other district that I did speak with did receive a bid from a different company, also an 8% increase. And also, but tied it to making sure they still got some of their money from when they were closed this year, or else they were going to raise the price even more. But again, this is the one area I would say business managers in the school districts are usually pretty quiet about. I feel like people are usually very willing to share things, but just in talking with Kathy, this is not an area that people typically share a lot of information for whatever reason.
Nobody does the same thing. Yeah. But it's still public information.
Have you been able to find increases anywhere?
I'm not saying they publish it, but it is public.
Like through a FOIA or?
Yeah.
Mr. Hillman?
What was the percentage we were increased last year?
Overall, it was a 10% for both regular and special ed. It was.
So this 8% is across the board or just one area?
Both again. They went 8% for regular and special ed.
So in a 2-year period of time, we have an 18% increase?
That's correct.
I kind of think that's kind of outrageous.
Well, they used in the pandemic to.
Well, and the 10% from this year was negotiated down, correct? Weren't they asking for like 20 or something?
Correct. If I remember correctly, they might have started off with a 15% for one of the services and 10% for the other, and we negotiated the 10% for both.
Right. So now they're trying to get it anyways.
One of the things that I would throw a suggestion out there, and again, we're open to anything that the board directs, but having Kathy go back and making a counter offer at this point, and also letting them know that, let's say maybe at the February board meeting, we're going to talk about it with the board, and that if we don't like the counter offer, that we are possibly looking to go out to bid.
I have a
I'm sorry. Craig, is that a hand up?
It is.
Okay, I think he had it up first. Go ahead.
So refresh my memory on the bidding process. If we choose to go out to bid, we're still inclined to have to use the lowest bidder?
Yes. Yes, unless there's some reason that a bidder is not the lowest responsive bidder. That is the criteria. We do have to go with the lowest price.
So they can come back with a higher percentage.
Which they do very
They end
often.
up paying even more.
And
Yeah.
that has happened. Yeah, which normally, you know, when we go out for bid, I feel very comfortable making a recommendation to the board financially, whether it's a good decision or not. This one is so unknown.
Wayne?
Okay, so going out to bid with which I will just classify, although I profess I don't have a wealth of knowledge, to me would be a high risk endeavor to go out to bid for something like this versus something else that's more straightforward. Do we have knowledge as to how many companies are truly out there in the area servicing the school, so we can really foretell realistically who would return a bid?
You're usually talking Illinois School Bus,
And they bought up a bus.
Sunrise, and then everyone else owned by Illinois School Bus.
Yeah. That's two.
You might
that
get a
sounds
third in
very
there.
high risk. I mean, I think we've said this before when we've had issues with the bus company. I think when we were discussing negotiating down that last percentage, and I won't poo-poo anybody else, but I know I personally use the term extortion. I just feel like that's just a situation we're unfortunately in, where we don't really have the upper hand in this type of situation. It's a shame, but- Yeah.
Teresa?
One of the things that I was thinking about when we were talking about these different things and why they're saying that the increases, a lot of it is because of COVID. Is there a way for us to maybe agree to some of the stuff, but say, hey, as COVID goes away, we are going to expect, can you tell us what your percentage that you're jacking us is due to COVID? So when COVID's gone, it goes away.
Yeah, and that was the conversation I had
You know?
with that other district today. One of the things is they agreed to the amount of money, but wanted that kind of piecemealed out to see, all right, this is how much. So instead, all right, we're agreeing to a 5% increase or a 6% increase instead of the 8%. We'll still pay you this as a COVID thing, but once these go out. Now, they could still come back and make that up in the percentage next year, but then you have another chance to negotiate that.
Opportunity to do something.
So
Yeah,
that-
and I think that, it's just like anything. People are taking advantage of the, situation. I mean,
I don't even think it's COVID though. I mean.
I don't think it is, but you can push them.
Because I remember we had issues with them even before COVID. So this to me is just a supply and demand issue where they know they've got all the supply, we have all the demand, and there's nothing we can do because there's no one else we can go to. So, I mean, short of opening up for bid and potentially getting back a higher bid, and probably listening and like, okay, fine, we don't bid, we will come back. But I guess I don't have a good solution, but the worst case scenario is we end up with even higher than 8%. Right? I mean,
And 8% is double what
Well-
we were getting raised before.
And I would say, I would add on to say the worst case scenario would be 8% or higher
Right.
with a company we're not happy with. Because I will say at this point overall, and I've worked with numerous bus companies, that we're pretty happy as far as bus companies go with what we've had from here. That being said, I still think 8% is ridiculous. And I would like to try to see if we can get that down a little bit. And then come back to you in 2 weeks with that conversation of exactly where we are, unless anyone else feels like, no, we need to go right out to bid now.
I think it's wise for us at least try to negotiate it.
Yeah.
How about if we put in the suggestion, no, now I'm talking about first trying to get it down, and then, and of course, if they don't, some kind of guarantee that when COVID is over, that it will be a lower, much lower increase.
Or a multi-year contract.
Yes.
I would have
That's what I
to
mean,
look at the
That's a great idea.
legalities of that, but certainly that might be an option.
That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask. I don't understand how it is legally mandated when you go out to bid to take the lowest bid. I understand the thinking behind it, but what I don't understand is then how do we have the option not to have to go out to bid when the contract is over and just to allow them to extort? in multiple different scenarios, not just the, I know we've talked about this with the lunch and milk, and it just, that doesn't make sense. It should be, when your contract is up, there should be no negotiating. It just, if they're mandating the bid, that's what it should be. So.
And there's a few bus companies out there that I wouldn't want to touch in terms of pools that I've dealt with in the past.
And I think we've kind of learned our lesson a little bit with the food service. We did have a food service that was less expensive, but when we did the bid, they were excluded because we had some criteria in there. And sometimes, in the case of food service, you get a little bit more what you pay for.
Yep.
All right, so we'll plan on moving forward in that direction, and we'll get back to you as soon as we hear anything else. So.
Okay, good. Thank you. Great input. Okay, so hard to believe, March 10th, I went back and I did the research. March 10th, right before everything went crazy, was our discussion on the minimum wage increase. And what I wanted to do really just today is just an overview of where we were at almost a year ago. And so the conversation is just going to be, it's going to be very general. We're not going to talk about specific job categories or classifications. But in your packets that I shared with you are just really a couple of visuals on the impact of the minimum wage. And so when the minimum wage law went into effect in 2019, we were okay on January 1 of 2020 because our least paid job classification met minimum wage. Then in July 1, if you remember, 2020 was the only year that there were 2 bumps in minimum wage. It went to $10 an hour. So we made that adjustment. And just last board meeting, the board approved the adjustments for both starting salary and current salaries for anyone below $11. And so by 2025, which we all know now, it's going to be $15 an hour. And current legislation at the federal level, it may be even earlier, but we're not even going there right now. So
That's just an executive order right now. It's not legislation.
Right. Okay, so I really just wanted to show you graphically what this means to a couple of different job classifications. So the bottom line on your graph that you're seeing is really just minimum wage. And we do have a job classification that we had to bring up to minimum wage. So I think it's safe to say that job classification is paid minimum wage. And obviously, if we keep our starting salaries of our current employees, you see how they remain level, and then that minimum wage employee just keeps getting higher and higher. And the next graph is really just the same information, just stated differently. So obviously, as you move farther to the right to 2025, that minimum wage individual is now making more than maybe a job classification that requires more skills. So just a couple of different graphs to show you the impact of it. And so we won't talk in detail again about the starting salaries, but I provided you graphs of some comparable salaries, because there's several different ways we can approach this. Where do we want our starting salaries to be to retain and attract employees? We've talked about a couple of job classifications, that we're having trouble filling because our minimum, the wage for some district down the street might be considerably higher. It might be a little higher. So really the direction from the board is, where do we want to be in terms of competition to recruit qualified people that we are going to retain? And then after we have that discussion, it really comes down to, what, if anything, do we want to do with our current employees? Because brand new employees are going to be making
X amount of dollars.
right, right. So again, just a very global conversation, and then at the February session, in our closed session, we can get into more specifics about what we might want to do.
Okay, number one, I think it's hard to like attack all of this at one time because there are so many different moving parts. Number one, I think that we need to look at number one, making our base things to be competitive, to be more competitive, to bring those people to our district. People want to work here and they start and then they see other things and then they go. We've lost good people.
Yes, we have.
That's number one. So I think we need to do that. One of the things that I had emailed you because I didn't want to forget and typing it down, you probably didn't see it, was the whole fact of that you want to reward those people who've been here. You don't want them sitting there and everybody just keeps encroaching. And one of the two of the thoughts that I had was, besides doing that first evaluation of keeping things competitive, but looking at it, and it's how they do it some other places. For instance, if you were to go to a place where, like say you're in Illinois where we've got a higher minimum wage, and you go to Indiana, you look at what percentage were you paid over the minimum wage in Illinois. So when you go to another state, you want to earn that same percentage over that minimum wage. So if we look at somebody who is making $16 an hour and the minimum wage is $8, they're making 200% of the minimum wage. So when minimum wage goes, they should be making, at the end of this, 200% of over the minimum wage. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like real easy to blanket out. But again, like we said, we still have that other problem of being competitive. You know what I mean? So I think you need to address that and then do that whole thing. And that was what I thought of, is the whole fact that you have that same distancing. I shouldn't say distancing, but you know what I mean? The people who are, you know, how do you explain that somebody who has a lot of experience, a lot of education and experience, all of a sudden the people who are walking in being, whether it's a lunch hostess or something like that, is making only a switch below what it is because you kept them consistent. So I think those are the two pieces we have to look at. And then the other piece I thought of that's a little bit harder to manage is you're talking about if you would do something like a longevity for those people who have been here. But that's a whole nother.
That's going to be a fine dance.
That's a hard dance to do with just the CREA versus teachers as well. But I know that is something that a lot of districts have out there. I mean, my husband's district has, you know, the longevity check, and it is nice. You know what I mean? So he's making this regular thing, and then you have that one, but that's always been there. You know what I mean? So.
Ms. Davenport?
And I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I remember in our prior conversations when this has come up, I think we've all agreed as a board that obviously we want to be competitive, not only to make sure people can come stay, but people actually seek us out to come here. So I think, and I won't speak for everyone else, but I think we all agree that this is something that has to happen. So I don't think the issue is doing it. I think the issue is more how to do it and how can we afford to do it. So I think Kathy should figure it all out. How the math is going to work out. But yeah, I think it's just going to be a financial feasibility issue versus should we do it or not, and how much can we actually how competitive can we really be based on our finances? I mean, it's a really tough thing.
And I would be very happy to do that. And what I'd like to recommend to the board are possibly 3 different scenarios. You know, and along with what Tirza had mentioned is in giving it some thought, I do think there needs to be a consistent measurement. I like where you were going with minimum wage. My thought was with the starting salary. If a new starting salary is $15, you know, and I've been here 12 years, what is that percentage? What increase am I making above that starting salary? And how can we maintain that without breaking the bank? So I would like to do, yeah,
it's tough. It's tough. And when do we have to negotiate with CREA again?
CREA is next year.
So we need to, I mean, to be honest with you, it's a whole pack of that we need to not only just address this, but we gotta be ready because you know that that's gonna be.
Well, and most of these positions do fall under CRESS.
That's what
Yeah, and CRESS, we just negotiated, so we have some time, but this would all come into talking.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it is that whole package. You have to kind of look at the big picture. You have to look at how does it impact us this year. You have to plan that out in the future and make sure you're not putting yourself in a financial hole where, all right, it looked great. We have all these people, but now you have to let 5 people go down the road because.
I do have a question. We're supposed to get that $2 million or whatever it is that we end up getting. None of that is for salary.
Well, and you don't, and Kathy and I have talked about this many times. You don't, when it's a one-time grant, you don't ever want to put it towards salaries because it's not. And
yeah.
And
well, I know they're going to probably go after it.
In certainly what we have done with our 3 temporary cleaning individuals, we're taking that out of the CARES. So in the event we need additional cleaning services, that could go in there, but with the intention that those individuals would hopefully no longer be needed. But we never want to put anything in a one-time grant that we would want to retain.
Real quick, you were talking about getting people seeking us out and people staying. Do we know, and this is just on some of these ones where these salaries are higher, is there a way or are people sharing, I guess is a nice way, of the longevity of the people who are there?
Turnover?
Yeah, what is their turnover rate? Are people there? Are they happy? Are they, I mean, I know they're probably not gonna say, everybody's great, it's not, but maybe they would share, you know what? We have found our turnover rate has gone over. Do we know if any of these districts have been doing what we've done? Like they found themselves not being as competitive. Did they find doing these increases have attracted more, kept more, whatever? I mean, I know a lot of people do because their kids are here and things like that, but at the same time, there's certain times when you're like,
it's worth the jump.
yeah, sorry, not sorry, gotta go. You know what I mean? My kid's now in junior high school. It was great when she was in kindergarten, 1st grade. Now she's gonna be in high school, and you know what? I gotta worry about paying for band, paying for something else.
And when this all started, I did reach out to, I have my little, clique of business managers, and they're so extremely helpful. And actually, none of them had this issue because their starting salaries were already higher.
Wow.
So that told me right then, like, wow, we need, this is something we need to work on. And all of the data in your packet is from Forecast 5. And Forecast
What is
5,
that?
oh, I'm sorry, that is our financial software. It has a couple of different capabilities, and one is comparative data. And it's a little bit more user-friendly in terms of longevity with certified staff, with teachers, but I can certainly look into it to see if we can get any of that information for non-certified staff. And that would help us.
I have a question, just out of curiosity, because it just dawned on me later. I noticed that we have like fair professional teaching certificates. How many do we have right now? Do we have a lot of them or not?
For paras?
Paras
we're
currently have a teaching certificate.
Not as many as you would think.
As we used to, because before we had a lot more.
Yeah.
Okay. When the paras went to their own
Contract.
I mean, it's question. So the advance, from what I understood before, because our paras were not in a union, when a position opened up like 6 weeks or 8 weeks, like something like that, FMLA, a para sometimes would walk from a para into a teaching position, get paid more, everything like that. And then when it was done, it was kind of nice. It was a nice like trial basis. We would know if they were a good fit as a teacher, but then they would go back into their para and then possibly over the next year or whatever, maybe if the teacher didn't come back, they do that. The whole fact that they're in that other union, is that creating a problem in any way, shape, or form with their tenure or their what do they call that? I'm the first person here. Seniority.
Yeah.
When it comes, does that affect their seniority in their new union?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It can impact, yes. It does impact.
And right now, with the substitute shortage though, we ask everyone. And if we have, let's say, 3 teachers with a teaching degree and then another couple with a substitute license, we're asking everyone and we still can't fill. So in a perfect world, that the seniority certainly might be an issue, but right now we're just desperate and we're asking.
Totally, and everyone's got everyone wants to go home and do their thing, but is that something that is normal to have such a low amount of substitute teachers? Is it just a COVID thing, or do you think that's something that's been happening?
It's been adding up, and
It started before.
yeah, and this is
And it moved fast. Because when I graduated, Annalisa is now 12. She was born when I started at Trinity. I was pregnant with, I just had Annalisa. And when I graduated, I couldn't find a teaching job to save my life, but I'm business education, high school. Now, mind you, over the course of time, trying to find a job, and it just went, and all of a sudden, boom. I mean, you're talking within 10 years, you went from way too many to none, and it also had to do with when they changed the retirement is and stuff, but it's just amazing how.
Yeah, there's a huge teacher shortage. I think I said before.
Yeah.
ISU had 1 person graduate a couple years ago in their teaching program. So all the high schools are pushing teaching internships now. But I know that where I work, there's a huge sub shortage. Like that's keeping people subbed out or whatever. Like that's like the line where they're going to close the building. So it's not an us problem.
It's everything.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate the discussion, and I think I have a pretty clear direction to go to. And at the February meeting in our closed session, we'll get into a little bit more specifics. Thank you.
I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us. It seems like it's been forever since we had an actual study session. So it was really nice to talk and to kind of look beyond just the pandemic, but look towards the future, which is, I think, what we all would like to do. So I hope everyone has a great evening. And if you can make it, 5 o'clock next Tuesday is when we're going to be looking at the legal services, which again, I'm excited to do. So stay safe out there.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.